kids, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lizzie. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're feeling good. I hope you had a good Easter and the Easter brought you lots of candy and toys. I went to the library in my old hometown today because my library isn't open because of COVID. I got 6 great books. Tonight we're going to be learning about the Wild West, but then we're going to be learning this week about prehistoric people, elephants. All of my books are going to be educational but fun. So stay tuned because I picked one, tried to go all through history to give you something good this week. So we're starting with the Wild West, which I should be in my old Wild West studio, but I can't. That's all my Easter decorations are over there. So let's look at the Wild West. It says, use the thumb index to leap through time and the story of the Wild West. So we're going to be jumping around. But ultimately, this whole book is going to be about the Wild West. So if you need a drink, a blanket, or a snack, hit the pause button. Now would be a good time. If not, we're getting right into the Wild West. You excited? Imagine you were in the western United States, and it's hundreds of years ago. It is a vast, empty land with nothing but grassy plains and herds of grazing buffalo. It may not seem very likely, but there is an exciting story to tell about what will happen here in the future. The events take many years to unfold, but you can follow them in this book. The story is like a journey. It is not a journey you can make by plane, car, or ship. In fact, you don't have to go anywhere at all. You are about to travel through time. With each turn of the page, the date moves forward a few years. You are still in the same place, but notice how many things change from one page to the next. Each date, each stop on your journey is like a new chapter. The time when the Indians had the land to themselves, the arrival of new settlers from overseas, the building of farms, villages, and towns, the coming of the railroad, the days of the cowboys, outlaws, and gunfights, all tell the story of what has become known as the Wild West. Okay, ready? Says, the first thumbnail is 600 AD. American Indians have lived on the Great Plains for thousands of years. They travel about on foot, hunting the herds of buffalo that roam the plains. Buffalo provide the Indians with most of their food. Their skins, fur, and bones are useful for making clothes, teepees, which are tents, weapons, and tools. As soon the lookouts spot a herd of buffalo, the hunters begin to stalk them, carefully herding the animals along valleys. They slowly drive them toward a strong wooden enclosure called a corral, which they have already built. As the buffalo approach the corral, the hunters run toward them, shouting, waving skins, and prodding them with flint-tipped spears to make the buffalo run into the corral. The hunters need great skill and courage to herd the huge animals without being trampled or gored by their sharp horns. The American Indians. People first settled in North America between 35,000 and 15,000 years ago. The date is uncertain. During the Ice Ages, the sea level was lower than it is today. It was possible to walk from northeastern Siberia to Alaska. Hunters followed their prey, mammoth, deer, and other animals, into this new land. Over the years, people spread out to all parts of the Americas, where game was plentiful, in forests and on the Great Plains. People continued to live by hunting. In some places, they turned to farming. There's the Indians trying to get those buffalo into the corral so they would have meat. Crazy. Look at how big the buffalo are compared to them. That had to be very scary. I've seen buffaloes. They're prominent in my area. They're big. Big creatures. All right, ready? We're going to another time jump. The year is 1800. The lives of the Plains Indians have changed dramatically since the arrival of European settlers. The Spaniards brought horses, which quickly became prized possessions among the Indians. Horses allow them to travel great distances at high speed to hunt buffalo with greater success. A man on horseback can now gallop alongside a running buffalo, wielding his spear or bow arrow with deadly accuracy. Hunting on horseback also makes herding buffalo into corrals or driving them over cliffs easier for the hunters. The Indians trade, steal, and breed horses. This has led to fighting between tribes. Instead of cooperating to find food, parties of Indians now raid one another's camps. Some tribes have become famous for their particularly swift and fierce and ruthless attacks. A raiding party sweeps into a neighboring camp on horseback, taking everyone by surprise. They drive away the horses and steal the stored meat and grain, as well as spears and bows and arrows. The raiders now have guns. Neighboring tribes often have fierce battles. Warriors gain honor from a brave and victorious fight. So, horses came. It was their new way of hunting and getting around, but it also led to a lot of conflict between tribes. The horses came and then war came, and they were fighting from tribe to tribe. Like the Mohawks were fighting the Iroquois, were fighting the Seneca. They were all fighting each other for horses. Are you ready to jump? Now we are at, it just says a few years later. Teepees are made of long wooden poles covered with buffalo hides. They are carried on a travis, a sled pulled by dogs or horses. Just a little fact for you. Alright, so this is just a few years later. They don't give a date. A group of Indians from the Sioux tribe has set up camp close to where their lookouts have sighted a herd of buffalo. While the hunters ready their horses and weapons for a day's hunting, the women prepare buffalo hides, which they will make into clothing, teepees, or bags. They stretch and peg the hides out to dry, cleaning them with sharp bone scrapers. Other women hang fresh buffalo meat onto a wooden rack to dry. In goes that dyslexia. This will be the main food supply for the group when the buffalo have moved on. The children of the camp run about and play, but there is also work to be done. Girls help their mothers, while boys learn how to use weapons. Inside a teepee, one of the elders of the group tells stories to the children to teach them about the tribe's history. The teepee has warm hides on the floor and wooden backrests to lean against. So now they're creating little villages. The Indians are growing vast across the plains, following their meat. I don't know if you can see up closer, but they tell you. So we have one woman is drying the meat over here. A little kid over here is learning how to shoot a bow. We have women cleaning the hides so they can make clothing and stuff out of them. Baby carried in a cradle board. So see that on the woman's back? That's how they carried their baby. And this is a teepee right here. This is a travis. What they carried on the back of the mule. This guy over here with the big hat. I can't see him. Here, now you can see him. This is the chief. What else we got? See, they leaned against the tent for a backrest. The girl is leaning. I think that's everything that they're showing us. You ready to jump again? The 1840s. A group of white settlers from far away in the east are traveling across the plains in search of new, fertile farmland in the west. The settlers travel in wagons drawn by mules, horses, or oxen. As evening falls, they draw their wagons into a circle to keep out wild animals. The men repair their wagons, feed the animals, and consult maps to plan for the next day's travel. The children play while women prepare the evening meal over a fire of buffalo dung or buffalo chips, which means they burn buffalo poop that had dried out. They rely on the food stores they carry, as food is scarce on the plains. So there's all the settlers in their wagons with their mules, and at night when they're making camp, they put everything in a circle for protection. This is right here, buffalo chips. They collect buffalo poop because it's flammable and they can start a fire with it. They have a man over here repairing a wagon wheel for the next day's travel. What else we got? We have men over here looking at maps, trying to figure out where they're going to go the next day. This is a wagon. Over here we have Indians. I'm not sure if they're looking on or if they're a part of it. That's it so far. So now we have English settlers on the plain with their wagons. Let's see, ready to jump again? A few years later, most of the old hunters panned for gold in stream beds. They swiveled water and gravel around in a metal pan, trying to find flakes or nuggets of gold. So this is when people start looking for gold. So a few years later, a group of families from the east are traveling westwards toward Oregon or California. They have been inspired by reports from previous travelers who tell of rich farmland and a pleasant climate. On their journeys west, however, the group have met other travelers who have given up and turned back. They warn the families to expect hardships such as hunger, thirst, heat, and cold. Deadly diseases such as cholera are common and have killed many people. The group hope that they will have more luck. One of their fears, however, is attack by fierce Indian tribes. But the Indians they meet are friendly and eager to trade goods, although some demand money for passing through their lands. By now the Indians are used to white settlers. They have traded with fur trappers and adventurers known as mountain men for many years. As the wagon train pauses to rest, the Indians trade buffalo hides and dried buffalo meat for blankets, guns, and luxuries such as beads and mirrors. They also help the travelers to plan the next part of their route. This is when the gold rush is happening. Not all travelers along the Oregon or California trails were in search of fertile farmland. The Mormons, a group following the teachings of Joseph Smith, left the East where they were hated and attacked for their beliefs. They settled on the desert shores of the Great Salt Lake in Utah, and they're still there to this day. In 1848, gold was discovered in California. Tens of thousands of men went there in hope of making a fortune to take home to the East. But few actually did. Towns grew up around mining areas, although many were quickly deserted when the gold ran out. Some eventually became large cities. So they were either looking for farmland or looking for gold or looking to go where they could practice their religion. So there's a bunch of all different types of people, and this is where they're camping for the night. Trading some buffalo hides here. See them? They're trading blankets over here. Trading some guns. Giving up their bow and arrows for guns. And helping them plan the route so they knew where to go, the Native Americans. Just a mix of things going on. Are you ready to see what happens? Let's jump a few more. Whew, the 1860s. Life on the plains was much harder than the homesteaders had expected. There was floods and snow in the winter and droughts, fires and tornadoes in summer. Worst of all, there were insects. Thick swarms of grasshoppers could suddenly settle on a homestead and eat all the crops in a matter of hours. The homesteaders were left with nothing. So herds of bugs could be bad. Let's see what it says. Settlers are now setting up home on the Great Plains. They come not only from the eastern states, but also from abroad. This family has come from Eastern Europe. They have almost finished building their farm or homestead. With little wood to be found on the plains, their houses are built from sod, slabs of turf cut from the ground. The heavy ground is baked hard by the sun and difficult to cut, so the family must wait until it has been softened by rain. Special heavy plows are needed to prepare the ground for sowing crops. Oh my God, it seems like a lot of work. The women look after the family and cook the meals. They collect dried buffalo dung to fuel the fires and antlers that will later be ground down into fertilizer for the crops. The nearest homestead is miles away, so visitors are always welcome. Ooh, land for free. To encourage people to settle on the plains, the U.S. government passed the Homestead Act of 1862. They set aside large areas of land and gave people a plot of 160 acres for free, as long as they built a house and lived there for 5 years. Hundreds of thousands of settlers eagerly took up this opportunity. Among the new settlers were black people who had once been slaves, but were now free. They were now able to build their own homes and farms. So they would give you free land to build on the house, but you had to live there for 5 years. Remember, life was pretty hard. But that's what a homestead looked like. It was just you and your family and the nothing for miles and miles and miles. What do we have here? So the ladies over here are collecting the buffalo dung, which is over here in the basket. See, that's full of buffalo poop, so they can start fires with it. Then we got men over here cutting sod, which is cutting the ground so that they could build their house. What else we got? Oh yeah, collecting antlers over here. Can you see them? So they can grind them down and feed them to their animals. This is a sod house built out of sod. This is what you would live in. This is just showing you what the inside looks like. There wasn't huge holes in them. A grass fire. That's not good. That can burn your whole land. Then we have plowing here. So they would have 2 mules and they would push this heavy piece of metal that would cut up the ground so they could put seeds in it. It's plowing the fields over here. A lot of work just to survive there. Are you ready to jump and see what happens? Ooh, just a few years later, the cavalry, soldiers on horseback of the U.S. armed protected settlers in the vast areas of land between the eastern U.S. and the New West. Cavalry soldiers were based at forts along the westward trails. People often settled near a fort for protection from Indians. The homestead is under attack from a group of Indians. They are angry that their territories are being taken over by white settlers. They fear for the safety of their people and the future of their way of life and have decided to fight back. Some of the men of the homestead are inside the house with the women and children, shooting through the windows. Other men take cover outside, trying to shoot the Indians as they gallop past. The Indians drive away cattle and start fires around the house. They are armed with guns as well as bows and arrows. Suddenly, a warning shot goes up from one of the Indians and a cheer from the homesteaders. A group of armed U.S. cavalry soldiers from a nearby fort is arriving to rescue the homesteaders. The Indians take a few final shots and gallop away at top speed. On the warpath. When people began to settle in the fertile West, the U.S. government promised the Indians that the Great Plains would always belong to them. However, as more people moved west, more land was needed. The government moved the Indians into smaller territories and finally into reservations, areas of land occupied by one tribe but run by white traders ran by white traders and settlers. This began years of terrible wars in which many people on both sides were killed. My goodness. So they were fighting over land. That's the cavalry, the group of U.S. men that came in. And these are the Indians trying to kill the homesteaders because they're mad that they built the house and are living on their land. And then you have owners of the houses. They shoot through these windows here. And then you have homesteaders out front trying to shoot away the Indians. And then you have Indians over here with a lit fire arrow and starting the house on fire. Not a good time. Lots of fighting, lots of bad stuff. Let's jump and hope it gets better. So, in a few more years, not a specific date, the first ranchers settled on the Texas prairies. They used cowboys to herd their cattle north across the Great Plains to the railroads to be transported to markets in the east. Later, ranchers set up homes on the Great Plains, closer to the railroads. Early ranches were unfenced and cattle could wander for miles. The invention of barbed wire fencing meant that ranchers could keep their own cattle on their land and wild cattle out. On the bare, dry plains, many farms and towns used windmills to pump water from under the ground. In the railroad towns, these were especially important to provide water for the steam engines of the trains. The site where the homestead used to stand has now grown into a small town. A new railroad is being built, which will pass by the town, carrying goods and cattle. People have come here to set up homes and businesses. Many of the buildings in the small town are only temporary shacks or tents, homes to the men who are working to build the railroad. There are also more permanent wooden buildings, such as a church and a saloon. A small school has been built for the children of the few families living in town. As the railroad workers haul the rails into place, other men are building barbed wire fences to make cattle pens. Telegraph poles are being erected next to the railroad so that messages can be passed from one end of the country to the other. A stagecoach is being loaded with passengers, baggage, and mail. Until the railroad is completed, the stagecoach is the fastest way to travel. Wow. Okay, so we have a lot going on. Let's take a big view at it. And I'll show you specifically, we have the men over here are building the railroad tracks and building fences so that they can put the cattle in it. And we have a supervisor on the horse making sure everything's getting done. And this is a telegraph pole, almost like an early telephone pole. This is so that they can, Morse code messages to each other. Got a photographer, so now they're able to take pictures. Taking a picture of this group seated on the bench here. See if I can get closer. Can you see it? This is a stagecoach right here. It's just a covered wagon with horses, and until the train is done, that's the fastest way to travel. The train makes it faster, though. And then we have a church right here. This is their church. This is the windmill that pumps the water up to the ground. Then we have the tents over here where all the workers were staying that were building the railroad tracks. We have wagons coming in with people to trade. And people building businesses like this trailer tent where you could get suits made and dresses. Oh, sorry, this is the public school so that the kids could go to school. Starting to look like a little town. Instead of just one house for miles, Now we have lots of people for miles. Are you ready to jump and find out what happens? Ooh, the 1870s. Busy cattle towns often attracted criminals known as outlaws. Cattle rustlers tried to steal cattle as cowboys drove the cattle toward the town. Other outlaws were robbers, highwaymen, or even murderers. Some outlaws, such as Billy the Kid and Jesse James, became well known. People wrote stories about their adventures, and myths grew about how they lived and died. The 1870s, the small town has grown rapidly since the railroad was completed. Wood has been brought in by the rail to build more houses as well as shops and hotels. There are wooden walkways outside the buildings on the main streets. In front of the walkways are wooden hitching rails for people to tie up their horses. So no cars yet. The town plays an important part in the cattle trade. Cowboys drive cattle from ranches in the south across the plains to the town. They herd the cattle into pens and then load them onto trains headed for markets in the east. When the cattle are loaded, the cowboys can enjoy life in town. There are plenty of boarding houses to stay in, and saloons, bars, dance halls for them to relax, and after weeks or even months on the cattle trails. Wow, okay, so we have first ever wooden sidewalks where people could walk on. So sidewalks were invented. This is the hitching trail where you could tie up your horses to this little wooden bench-like looking thing. Still have stagecoaches in town. This is the ranchers pushing the cattle up to the train. We've got some cowboys here. These are the cowboys that would take the cattle all across the country here. You see the cattle pens over here? It's where they kept all the cattle until they could put them in the train. They're loading them up right onto the train beds. You see it through that little bridge. See it? We got telegraph wires. Look at them. It looks like phone booths. Why do I keep saying phone booths? Telephone poles. And this is a steam engine. The steam coming out that powers the train. This is an old church right here. This is like an early hotel. This is where you kept your animals. You could store your animals in a barn here. We've got a saloon, which is like a bar or a restaurant. Got the general store. So you could go to a grocery store here. All kinds of stuff. Looking like a real city. Are you ready to jump and see what happens next? A few years later, there were several kinds of law officers. Local marshals made sure that their towns were law-abiding and dealt with minor crimes such as fights. Sheriffs were in charge of counties. Both sheriffs and marshals had deputies to help them, and also used groups or posses of local people when hunting an outlaw. U.S. Marshals and their deputies took charge of a territory or state. They dealt with those accused of more serious crimes and brought them to court to face a judge. The town is even bigger and has become quite rowdy. Outlaws come into town to steal horses and to rob people. The cowboys that thronged the town had also caused a lot of trouble. They spent most of the money they have earned from the cattle drive on drinking and gambling, which often causes arguments and fighting. In the saloon, a drunken fight has started because someone has cheated in a card game. In the street outside, passerby run for cover as a gunfight breaks out. The marshal hurries out of the jail to break up the fight before too many people get hurt. Oh my God, so you just had people shooting in the streets. If they didn't like each other, they would just shoot each other and do all kinds of horrible things. Law and order. At first, nobody took charge of law and order in the new towns that grew up across the West. Instead, local people, called vigilantes, grouped together to catch outlaws and hang them for their crimes. However, the vigilantes also attacked innocent people and their own personal enemies. As the towns grew and families began to move into them, the U.S. government sent in marshals, sheriffs, and judges. These lawmen often helped to clean up a town, but some were criminals themselves. My goodness, so look at this. Look at the town now. It looks even more like a city. We got stables still to hold your horses, a hotel and saloon. People could live in there and eat and drink. That's where a lot of fights broke out. They would gunfight right in the street, just like the Wild West. Had a better grocery store. They're a marshal now, police, and they had a jail in there as well, so they could put all the bad guys. Saloon and boarding house. This is where people like early hotels or they stayed long term. Just lived in one room, shared a bathroom, and no indoor plumbing. You pooped in a pot. All right, ready to jump? See what happens? Early 1900s. After years of battles in which the Indians usually suffered most, the wars between the U.S. Army and the tribes reached their height in 1876 at the Battle of Little Bighorn. General Custer's forces were defeated by the Indians. The Army took revenge by forcing all Indians into reservations where they had to obey U.S. law, even if they had not taken part in the wars. In 1890, stories of a ghost dance that would make the settlers disappear excited the Indians. The Army panicked, leading to the killing of 153 Sioux Indians at the massacre of Wounded Knee. This was the last battle the Indians were defeated on the plains. Early 1900s. It is a time of progress and excitement. The town has grown into a bustling city. Its main streets lined with shops, electric streetlights, and paved sidewalks. So no more wooden sidewalks. Now they had paved ones. And electricity. Telephone wires link businesses and homes. People stroll into the large department stores to buy new inventions such as a vacuum cleaner and an electric iron. Many visit the movies or Nickelodeon to see a cowboy show. Wow, Nickelodeon's old. Some people still travel on horseback or in horse-drawn vehicles, but others use the public trolley cars. These run on the rails and are powered by overhead electric cables. Many people are even able to afford their own cars, but there are not many rules of the road. So there's no stop signs or street lights yet. Oh my goodness, what a busy place. It looks so much better, doesn't it? Let you take it all in there. What do we got here? So these are the trolley tracks. So this is the trolley. So it would come down the roads on the little tracks here. Oh no, there's a car crash because there's not many rules. That's what the early cars looked like. No roof on them. There's a paved sidewalk, no more wooden ones. Got a hotel. Now it's called the hotel. Just stores everywhere. 2 stories now, not just one. Growing and growing. Are you ready to see what's next? Ooh, and today, this is modern times. Wild West shows have been performed since the late 1800s when Buffalo Bill Cody toured America and Europe with a show called Buffalo Bill's Wild West. The entertainment included displays of shooting skill, stagecoach hold-ups, it means robbing a train pretty much, rodeo riding, and mock battles with Indians. The show spread a false image of Indians as fierce and ruthless. The Wild West has always been a popular subject for movie makers. Stories about bands or daring outlaws and the lawmen who hunt them down often lead to an exciting gunfight at the end of the movie. On the outskirts of a modern city, with its towering skyscrapers and fast pace of life, a Wild West theme park has been built. It has thrilling rides such as roller coasters, and there are many shows and attractions. People dressed as cowboys ride up and down the streets. A crowd gathers to watch a show where a shootout takes place. The actors make this seem funny and exciting. A rodeo show demonstrates real-life cowboy skills such as bull roping and riding. Children can go for rides on a pony, in a stagecoach, or even on a miniature railroad. There are many fast food restaurants and a saloon with music and dancing girls. Visitors come from miles around to experience a little of the Wild West. But does this match real life in the Wild West a century ago? So now, where there once was that homestead and bustling city, it is now a theme park that you can go to. It has a cavalry parade so you can see the fake police. They have stagecoach. You can ride ponies. You can go to a rodeo. You can have a fake shootout. There's a miniature steam engine railroad. Got a big roller coaster, and it's right outside of the gigantic city. So, if you really want to know what the Wild West is today, you can go to the theme park. But it has been a long time in the making to become what it is now. Let's look at some words we learned, should we? We learned about the cattle trail. That's the route taken by cowboys driving herds of cattle. There are several main cattle trails, including the trail north from Texas to towns on the railroad. So a cattle trail is just the route they took the cattle to the trains. We have cavalry, which is a group of soldiers that fought on horseback. Early police. A corral, a pen for cattle or for buffalo herded together for slaughter. A defensive circle of wagons made by white settlers who also called it a corral. So basically it's just an animal pen where they could have put all the animals before they wanted to eat them or load them into trains. We have cowboys. These are the men that took all the cattle and buffalo to the trains. They were called cowboys. A deputy was like the sheriff or the marshal's assistant, help them do what they needed to do to get rid of the bad guys. The Great Plains, a vast tract of land in North America, laying between the Mississippi River to the east and the Rocky Mountains to the west. So it's a big, over several states. Before white people settled there, the plains were barren grasslands grazed by buffalo and inhabited by a number of different Indian tribes. So the Great Plains used to belong to the Indians, and the white settlers took it away from them. A homestead is a farm established by settlers on the Great Plains. That's when people just lived one house, just you and your family, and then you would have a neighbor way, way far away. So that's just a homestead when it's just one family. A marshal is an early police officer. Nickelodeon is an early cinema or movie theater. So it's not the cartoon. Instead of saying, hey, we're going to the movies, they'd say, hey, we're going to Nickelodeon to watch a movie. Outlaw is somebody who broke the law, like Billy the Kid, Wyatt Earp, all the people that robbed and did bad things. A posse was a group of people that joined together to fight those outlaws and to stop them. A ranch is a big farm where they kept all the cattle so they could sell them. Reservations is where they made the Indians go and live on their specific parts of land. Because we took their land and we gave them a small corner that they could live on, and they called it a reservation. They still call it to this day. A rodeo is where you go and you see the cowboys try to ride a bull, and they're like doing this, and the horse shows. It's just a show about animals and things they did in the Wild West. A sheriff is also an early police officer. A stagecoach is a covered wagon pulled by horses. So, and if you couldn't travel by train, you would travel by stagecoach with the big wheels and the horses in front. A teepee is a big tent the Native Americans used to live in. A telegraph was before we had the telephone. We had a little piece of metal and we had something called Morse code. And they would hit a code to spell out a word. And someone at the other end would hear it and write it down. And they would call it a telegram. And they would write out the message and deliver it to you. So that's how the first phone system worked. A travois, I think it's called, a horse-drawn sled used by the Indians to transport their teepees and belongings. Basically an early truck. Vigilantes were people who took law into their own hands to settle crimes before we had a police department. So I hope that was fun and you learned a lot about the Wild West. I will see you next time with another story. Thank you for listening, and like I said, I hope you learned a lot because the Wild West is very old and it has a lot of history, more so that's even in this book. This just gave you the highlights. See you next time. Be good to your parents, be good to your teachers, be good to your siblings and elderly people, other kids your age, and be good to yourself, okay? Love you all. See you next time. Bye.